Let's speak to Laura Blumenfeld now. She's a Middle East analyst at the Johns Hopkins University, currently in Palm Beach, Florida. Good to have you again with us, Laura. What happened to finally enable this breakthrough?
Well, it's a breakthrough. It's kind of a stop the bleeding ceasefire. It isn't really a healing peace. I'd like to talk about hope today, but I think the fear factor is what happened that finally got us to that breakthrough. On all sides. I mean, starting with Hamas, there was the fear of their irrelevance, of their eradication. They were weakened both internally in Gaza and also regionally as Israel took out the various proxies, starting with Hezbollah in Lebanon and with Assad falling in Syria, and then Israel took out the air defenses in Iran. And so I think that there was that kind of fear factor for Hamas, and the same kind of a different kind of fear, but equally as motivating for Netanyahu. Yes, he had kind of a political, domestic safety net now. I think that he can make this deal without falling from government. But Donald Trump is like a tornado twisting on the horizon. Trump does not want this on his plate when he takes the oath of office on Monday, on January 20th. And I think that was a kind of a offer that Netanyahu couldn't refuse, this deal. The same can be said for Biden and Trump. Both of them had a fear factor. For Biden, it doesn't feel good leaving office with this, hostage deal still on his shoulders. And for Trump, who's all about appearances, it doesn't look good taking office, swearing in with a hostage mess and war in Gaza. So all in all, I think these kind of factors came together, and here we are. It's kind of an exploding offer with an end date of January 20th, and everybody decided to go for it.
We'll dissect each of those bits. Let's start in Israel first. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying the final details are still being worked out. What do you think is going on there?
Well, the devil is in the details, as it always is in the Middle East. I know when I worked under Secretary Kerry for President Obama on the Israeli-Palestinian negotiating team, we spent 3 days haggling with the Israelis and Palestinians over the placement of a comma. And in the end, we weren't successful, by the way. So I think that President Biden put out a 3-phase plan, which is always complicated, as my Israeli counterpart negotiator said to me at the time, the only plans that work in the Middle East are a 1-point plan. So I think that, there's still a lot of opportunity for things to fall apart. I do think we'll get through that first phase, which is the good news. The bad news, I hear a lot of people using the verb hope. We hope to get to the second phase. And when you use the verb hope in the Middle East, that's when I start to worry.
Right. President Biden said this deal was what he proposed back in May. So why did it take so long to be agreed upon?
Right. Netanyahu's already pushing back against that statement. He's sort of channeling Henry Kissinger, the Secretary of State, back in the 70s, who said that you can't win at the negotiating table what hasn't been earned in the battlefield. So Netanyahu would argue that over these months, where Israel actually did reclaim some of the initiative and its deterrence power in the Middle East, that they have improved the terms of the negotiation. This is Netanyahu's claim. I can't verify it, but that now there are twice the number of hostages will be released than those that would have been on the table in May, that there is no precondition of an end of war for this negotiation to go forward. There's some tweaking of an area called the Philadelphia Corridor, which Israel insisted they had the right to continue to patrol. It's a strategic strip of land on the border between Gaza and Egypt, where they would like to sort of seal off those tunnels, which were a lifeline for Hamas through smuggling, and a few other items like the buffer zone, which Israelis felt was crucial to maintain and to actually build a buffer zone along the border with Gaza so that October 7th can never happen again. Biden, from the very start, was opposed to that. And according to Netanyahu, that's now back on the table.
And as you mentioned, Donald Trump has been taking credit for this agreement. I'm just wondering, a lot of the rhetoric from the Trump camp has actually been very pro-Israel, fighting against Hamas in a bolder way, I would say, compared to the outgoing administration. So why would that put pressure on the Israeli government to accept a deal? Why don't they just ride it out and see how much more support they can get from the Trump administration?
Well, it's interesting. Trump is more popular in Israel than Netanyahu. So, one thing that Trump could do if he wasn't getting his way with Netanyahu is go public and criticize him. The second thing is, of course, weapons. Israel is heavily dependent on the United States for weapons. But Israel has every incentive right now to start out on the right foot with Trump because, first of all, Netanyahu has bigger fish to fry. I mean, it's hard to believe that because Israelis woke up yesterday morning, a Houthi missile had landed on a rooftop outside of Jerusalem. You'd think, could it get worse? And the answer is yes. Netanyahu has, a nuclear Iran that he'd like to stop. There's also the issue of the West Bank. Netanyahu and some of his right-wing cabinet members believe that the West Bank is actually Judea and Samaria, which is promised by God. These are biblical lands, according to them. They want to be on the right side of Trump at the beginning of his administration because there are issues like that, like the West Bank and Iran, that they like to work on, put Gaza behind them so they can move forward with their priorities.
And the Trump administration would essentially act as a guarantor for this agreement. How do you think they will approach it?
Well, like deal makers, and already there are some on the right in Israel where they're grumbling. They're saying Trump wanted to make a deal, but is this a deal at all costs? And is it even a good deal for Israel? The next step, by the way, after you get the ceasefire, as Biden was pushing, so is Trump, which is normalization with Saudi Arabia and expanding the Abraham Accords. Well, unfortunately for Israel or for the region, everybody's kind of taken a step back now from that expansive peace approach to the region. Saudi Arabia is now hardened their terms. They're saying rather than a pathway to a Palestinian state, which was their original approach in order to rapprochement with Israel, they're now saying there has to be a Palestinian state. So I don't know how Trump's going to square that circle, and Netanyahu certainly is not going to be open at this point to recognizing a Palestinian state. So the one bit of advice I would give the Trump administration is they're going to have to show extreme emotional intelligence, and good luck with that.
And what do you see the future of Gaza looking like? We're looking 15 months on from the beginning of this conflict, but also a lot of the underlying issues still remain.
Right. So there are the tangible issues. Gaza has been ground down into the sand. It's practically, washing up on the beaches there that they have there in Gaza. So there's going to be a 3 to 5 year rebuilding effort. And that will happen only if Gulf states feel like that it's a good bet, right? That it's a good investment, that it won't get flattened again in the next round of fighting. There's also political rebuilding. There's the economic part, but there's also political. Will the Palestinian Authority reform itself? It did not do that under President Biden, although Biden asked the Palestinian Authority to take steps. They did not listen to President Biden. Will Trump be able to kind of twist their arms and do the kind of reform necessary so that they can be trusted leaders in Gaza and take over from Hamas? I mean, those are questions that are, tough. There's no light at the end of Hamas tunnels. So the hope is that Hamas won't take over again, because then for what? Right? What was this all about? If Hamas is going to regroup and take over again, we're back to another cycle of violence.
Okay, Middle East analyst Laura Blumenfeld, thank you very much for your time and your insights.
Thank you.